Bought some Eicher brake discs from Eurocar Parts, the second cheapest ones they do. Got some Brembo brake pads because I didn't fancy messing around buying the cheap pads, and a Brembo tile number, whatever that is, brake caliper for the rear right, because obviously there's a bit of an issue with the retaining loop for the pad pin. But yeah, there we go. So we'll get started, I guess. Jack the car up, as always, get it on some axle stands and pull the wheels off. I don't know what idiot did these up, but don't use a rattle gun for this reason. Now, it's like 200 plus newtons, that is. Right. Seriously, that's ridiculous. I was worried they were going to break. So there we are, obviously jacked up, safely supported on jack stands. I've still got the jack underneath it just in case. I jacked it up under the diff. It's supposed to be where you jack it up in the middle and then you put the axle stand either side. There's little notches in the pinch seam under the sills that show you where to put them. So yeah, had a quick look around, nothing horrific. Obviously it's still got a ton of dirt and God knows what that we need to clean up. I'm not a neat freak or anything, but when you start working on stuff, the last thing you want to do is be taking apart stuff that's sort of sensitive to dirt, and then a big clod of this mud crap falls right in your bleed nipple or something. So anyway, that's all that. So I'm gonna have a bit of a tidy up in here, get the hoover in here. There's nothing horrific, nothing looks badly corroded or knackered. This is the first IS200 I've owned, so being as that's the case, I'm just going to say that everything's fine. And you obviously don't need to see me cleaning stuff in fast motion. So yeah, I'll pick you up when we're doing something a bit more interesting. But yeah, I'll just show you the brake quickly, because that was a bit of a discovery. So obviously this is the caliper, and I think the reason the brake pad's gone all wonky is because this pin here is what retains the brake pads in it, and these spring clips are sort of alignment clips. These clips aren't quite in right, but there's a whole nightmare of things going on. For some reason they've put the spring bit on the outside upside down, and it's supposed to go up here, and anyway this whole thing's been assembled wrong. But I'll show you the biggest problem, which is this pin's supposed to obviously go through like a metal hole through an eye sort of thing, and the strap at the back of it is cracked off, so this pin is sort of like loose on this one side, which I think has allowed the pin to basically just go on the piss, or the pin's broken or something. But yeah, big chunks of God knows what are falling off. Either way, this caliper's knackered, the disc's knackered. Obviously we're going to do new pads and put the clips in right, because this clip should be sort of on the inside. That's it then, all hoovered out. We've had a bit of a mare this morning. Supposed to siphon some brake fluid out. Obviously we're going to be working on the brakes and stuff, pushing the pistons back in, so obviously that's going to push fluid back into the reservoir, and if it's too full, which this was at max, and the pads are all like more than halfway dead, so by the time we'd push them back to put new pads in, it would have overflowed the master. So need to use a turkey baster to pull that out. The only one I've got that works has got coolant in it, and I don't want to mix that with it. My brake fluid one has turned into a petrified plastic rock and will not sort of squeeze anymore, and the only other one I had left has rotted away and now has a hole in. So ended up using a transmission or gearbox oil pump, and just literally shoved the end of it into the brake master cylinder and pumped it out down the tube, so managed to avoid that crisis. Anyway, going to do the passenger rear, because that one looked okay. That's the first side of the brakes done. I wasn't intending on showing you this side because it was supposed to be just like that's done all easy, no problems. But again, this one at the back here, just where the pin goes through, was cracked as well. So I need a new caliper for this side, but I'd already got it apart by the time I noticed that, so I might as well put the new disc back on. So new disc on, that fits all right. New sets of pads in there. Managed to figure out the spring clip crazy anti-rattle shenanigans conundrum that Lexus posed for me, so I'll explain that on the sort of new caliper we've got for the other side. So what had happened was, because this is rusted so badly, it had actually started to close up inside around the disc. So the gap sort of between the actual caliper itself and the disc, because it's not a sliding caliper, it's fixed, but it had rusted so badly there was very little room for the new thicker disc to fit in, so I had to generally tap it and beat the crap out of it. And this is the amount of crusty, horrific rust that fell off the caliper, just so I could even get the thing back on the car. So okay, so we'll start by taking the pads out of this side, then we can take the caliper off. So first things first is to get the little R pin out of the pad retaining rod. So the little R pin comes up and that stops this rod sliding about. This sort of spring clip arrangement is already kind of wrong on this one, so we're going to ignore that. But basically then you push the pin out, which we might need to drive out a little bit. Normally I wouldn't do this, but mine's already cracked and broken on the caliper, which we'll be replacing it anyway. But you have to be careful doing this because you may break the caliper sort of eye parts of it. So generally just do it gently if you're going to do it. So we tap that out the other side. Wiggly wiggly, there we go. So that's the rod out. Then we need to get this crazy spring clippy thing off, which it doesn't help that this one's been installed wrong, so we'll just do that. Oh, there it is, and that's come out. So you've got two springs here. So that's now out. Then we get the pads out, so they'll probably be stuck. So we need to essentially, because this is a fixed caliper with two pistons, one for each pad, so we need to pull one back, which pushes the piston in, then we can release that pad. Then we need to push the other one back as well without this one coming back in, because there's a bit of a trick to this. So let me just go and get my clamp. Okay, so I use one of these quick sort of grip clamps, and essentially what I'm going to do is put one piece here on the caliper and then one piece here on one of the ears on the actual pad itself, and then just use that to essentially pull the pad back away from the disc, which also pushes in the piston back in the caliper. That releases the pad, and very carefully we can pry it out. Again, this has been in here so long and it's rusted so badly around it that they're actually an absolute pig to get off. So bear with. Oh, there we go. Yahtzee. So there you go, there's one of the pads, and you can see how terribly lipped this disc was. On the side there's like a 10mm lip that we showed you earlier. Those pads have got 6mm left on them, but they're absolutely munted. So there we go. Anyway, that gets that one out. Now the problem is, if you try and push the other one out like we did, it's going to drive this caliper on the other side. When you push that one back in, the fluid will push this piston back out, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is, using a shifter or a adjustable spanner, which is coated in this soft rubber. You can just get a normal metal one and wrap it up in like insulating tape. You just need something to soften it up so you don't damage anything. Then we pop that in there, and I'm going to lever it against the disc because the disc is anyway. So we're going to lever against the disc, and that pushes the piston further in, and then we need to do it a little bit the other way as well. So do it that way until the piston's fully out of the way. So that one's now completely pushed back home. So that's a good start. Then obviously we've got to do this other side. So I'm going to leave that in there while I use Mr. Clampy Clamp again. So we can counter hold this piston in while we squeeze the other piston back. And that's obviously why we needed to drain some fluid out of the master cylinder, because when we're doing that, we're pushing the fluid from here back up the pipe and back into the reservoir. And if that was filled to the max like it was when it started, it would have overflowed by now. So now we get to carefully lever this one out, because I'm sure this one's just as munted as the other one. And again, the horrific lip on the back of this disc isn't helping, because now the pad has that lip on it. It's locked in behind that lip, so we've really got to push this one back. So I'm going to carry on doing this, and then I'll get the pad out. And as suspected, the rear one's even worse. We've got about 5mm of pad. But yeah, there's a 12 to 15mm ridge, and that is a good 2.5–2mm deep. So that was locked in into a groove in here. So this is just ridiculous. So that is absolutely knackered. The disc is clearly knackered, and the caliper, again, just for a change, is completely knackered. So that's how to get that apart. Now, if you're going to keep your calipers, obviously you can see here all of the all of that crusty steel that I was talking about. All of that stuff there, that's corrosion, that's again causing problems. So what we need to do is now fully push these pistons back in, because otherwise we won't be able to get our new pads. And again, the disc will be thicker because that's brand new, and the pads will be thicker. So we need to really push those pistons back in. So this is where we use 2 wrenches. So I'll push one at the bottom and put that at a diagonal angle. So that's pushing on the bottom and the outer piston there. And then we do the other one inside here and use them to push against each other. Ooh. And that was a big chunk of the side of the disc falling off. So there we go. Then on the back, I'm going to have to manhandle you. On the back of this, we now need to take the caliper off. And on the back of this, you've got this bolt here, and then at the top we have another bolt here, that one there. They are 17mm socket, and they're tightened up to 105 or 104 newtons. Okay, so undo those 2 bolts, caliper slides off, then we rest that on a brick or a piece of wood so it doesn't put tension on the hose. So yeah, I'll whip those off. There's not enough room for you and the camera and the breaker bar in here, I'm sorry. So we're going to whip that off, and then yeah, I'll show you the horror show that is the disc. Well, that's finally off. As I suspected, the lip on this had rusted out so much. The weird thing is, I managed to crack it off, and now it's basically back to the same thickness as the worn area. So God knows what's been going on here, but they've obviously changed, like I said, the pads a few times, because this was put back on with this lip fully formed. So yeah, anyway, managed to knacker a set of pads, too tight to change the bloody discs. So those are and as you can see inside here, the sort of crusty rust and God knows what going on inside the caliper. They essentially shrunk the slot in there that then clamped around the lip that I had to basically bust off to actually get the caliper to slide off, because it was essentially interlocking with that ridge on the edge there. So yeah, the other side, as we know, needs a caliper as well as this one. So I'm not going to bother taking this caliper off and replacing it with a good one. I just want to get the discs and pads set up, then I can get another caliper and do both calipers at the same time. Going to put it all back together with good discs, good pads, and it'll still be okay then to move around while I wait for the other caliper to turn up. Otherwise I can't drive the thing and it's stuck here. So we're going to do half the job today and then half the job later on. But by the power of editing in YouTube, the next time you see the calipers and stuff going on, it's going to be the nice new ones. So I'll whip this disc off, which is not easy to do one-handed. There you go. Let's have a look at the back and see. Oh great, yeah, the back's even more horrific. So there you go. We had perhaps 15 to 20mm of pad actually doing anything on the back, and at least 12 to 15mm of that outer lip that will just probably bust off if we twat it with a hammer. There you go. Freaking giant horseshoe of crap. It was on the outside. So yeah, I mean, I've no idea. The frustrating thing is, if back in the day when they were changing those pads, they twatted this with a hammer and busted this lip off, it wouldn't have been half as bad. I mean, this still is ruined and needs resurfacing, but yeah, either way, this is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, there we go, that's off. Thankfully, handbrake shoes look okay, pretty good condition, the old springs and stuff, so yeah, not too bad. This surface, obviously, front of this disc is obviously going to need to rub back with some sandpaper or emery cloth just to get the rust off it. Otherwise, when you put the disc can be on the lash on this, and then the wheel also can be on the lash on that, which is not good. So it's important to clean this surface off, which we'll do with some sandpaper or emery. Then we'll put it all back together, and we'll go from there. But yeah. Okay, so reassembly time. Got myself some Brembo brake pads. Obviously, these are the wear indicators. So when the pad gets too thin, these metal is rub on the disc, and that's what makes that sort of screeching, singing noise. So you know you're down to your last mil or two. These already have the anti-squeal shims built into them. They're supposed to be some metal shims in between the pad and the piston, but there were none on my car, which goes to show how well looked after it is, and there were none on the pads either, as far as I can tell. They're just, yeah, there's nothing on there. And these have the anti-squeal shim already on them, clipped on the back. So put some copper grease on the back of that, and a light film on the back of that one as well. We're all back together now, so disc and pads both sides. The most important thing to remember now is, obviously, because we pushed the pistons in the calipers right back, now the pads are held quite a way away from the disc. So if I was to go and drive this now, the first time you hit the brake, the pedal just goes straight to the floor because the pads are so far away from the disc. They need to push the pads out until they even touch the disc first of all. So always give the brake pedal a few pumps. So now they should be pushed up against the discs, and as we can see, the discs don't want to turn, so they come out and they're pushed up, holding the discs in place now, because there's no retaining screws on these either, so that's cool. But there we go, so that's all sorted, both sides are back together, and just like that, it's a week later. So time to start draining the old fluid. Obviously, when we change the rear brake caliper, we're going to need to flush the system and bleed the brake, because obviously it'll have air in the actual pistons itself. So first thing I want to do is get rid of the majority of the old fluid in here and then top it up with some nice new stuff, because God knows when this was last changed. So we'll pop that off. Bought myself a massive syringe, 200 cc's, so couldn't find any turkey basters online that were worth buying. So there we go, got a little slurpy straw on the end of it as well, so we'll pop that off and retrieve the little filtery thing it's got in there. And then what I'm going to do is slurp out as much of this as I dare. There's obviously a min and max mark. I don't want to run it too low, but as long as you don't pump the pedal when there's no fluid in there, it won't introduce bubbles in the system, I don't think. So I'm going to bring it down as low as I dare, because the more of this crap I get out, the better it will be for when I replace it with the good stuff. So there we go. So that's the minimum mark. And that's as low as that side goes. I think we'll call that good. Maybe a bit over here. Oh yeah, no. That'll do it. Just finish topping it up. That should probably do it. And always put the cap back on, because obviously it absorbs water from the atmosphere, so I never like to leave the cap off that, and I never leave the cap off the bottle either. Always tighten the bottle top down. And because the brake clips and everything are correctly assembled from last time, I can actually show you the proper way of taking them apart. So you pop out the R pin. So now we've pulled the R pin out, we've got to slide up this metal plate, so tilt the top of it back a little bit to release the sort of side pieces, those little side hooks that rest in a groove. So tilt it out a bit and then slide it up. and that's now unhooked off of the cross pin, so the cross pin can come out. Now the cross pin's out, we tilt this up, slide the metal one off, and the hooky one comes off with it. So that's how easy it should be if this contraption has been put on properly. So now we're going to do pads out, and thankfully, because this has all been recently serviced, it all comes apart really easy without having to do anything crazy. I didn't even have to drive the pistons back in on that one. So yeah, I've got the handbrake on, which doesn't really seem to do anything, so that's fine. Yeah, now we've got to take the caliper off and replace it, so pinch this line off to stop it dripping too much. It always worries me it's just going to chop it in half, but sure, let's just clamp that off with that. So that should now reduce the amount of stuff about to come out of this, and then we'll crack off the banjo bolt that's holding it in, because trying to sometimes take that off when you've already removed the caliper, it's a bit difficult to hold the caliper because it's a bit ungainly. There we go. So that's that. Just crack that loose, nip it back up. There we go. And of course it's dripping. Yep. And now we'll undo the two big bolts and get the caliper off. Treated myself to a new ratchet. It's sort of halfway in between my small ratchet and a breaker bar because it's a bit easier to sort of get in here. Time for some updates. There wasn't a huge amount I could show you because literally all the hands would have been in the way. So old caliper is off, new caliper is on, changed out the copper washers. It's a 10mm banjo bolt or an M10 banjo bolt, so it's 10 ID, 15 OD, and the ones I measured were 0.75 thick, so they probably started off either a mil or 0.8 and were then crushed down. So that's all back on. So now we just need to tighten some stuff up before we put the pads in, start doing the bleeding and stuff. So I've just nipped this up at the back to hopefully stop it leaking too badly, although it still seems to be dripping a tiny bit because I haven't smushed it down far enough yet. And then we're gonna tighten up the caliper first. So it's 104 newtons to tighten that up. So I've got that set on my torque wrench. Get the old caliper holder 5000 out of the way. This is the difficult part, trying to get big tools in small spaces. So just feeling good. And that's 104 apparently. And the bottom one. There that one goes too. So that's them two. Have that back. And now I need to tighten the banjo bolt. The banjo bolt is 30 newtons apparently, which seems like quite a lot, but it's got steel obviously, so we'll give that a go. So 30 and the 14mm. And that was that apparently. Job's a good one. So we release this, spray it all off with brake cleaner, and hopefully it stops leaking. There we go. So I might crack the bleeder on that one just to help it gravity bleed or something. See if we can get something started. So also dry that off thoroughly so we can make sure there's nothing leaking. And apparently the bleed nipple on that is 8mm, so time for the pads to go back in then. So thankfully they fit. And the crazy W clip. So the W wire clip hooks into the top between those two, and you want it so the humpy bits on the bottom face outwards. So we hook at the top, that goes on there. Then the platey one has got these two sort of wraparound channels in the back. Hopefully see the two sort of wraparound claw things, and that needs to have this wire one in those claws, so probably should have done that before we put it on. So we go around the outside of him, outside of the other one, put the hook back in the top, and then keeping the wire spring in the bottom as well, and pull the plate one right to the very top. Then we stick the pin in. So the pin goes through from the back, and you want the wire spring to be under it. And also there's the bottom metal tab of the wire, of the plate one, that needs to be under it as well. That goes all the way through. That should all be in there like that. Stick the R pin in like that, and then we need to hook that bottom piece out and push down on this tab to finish the installation. So we'll hook him out, push down on that, and that should clip everybody into everybody, and everyone's hooked onto everything. So I've just taken the reservoir cap off, and we've now started to see brake fluid just dripping out the back of the nipple here. So we'll lock that off quickly because something's happening anyway, which is good, obviously, because the reservoir's higher up than the brake caliper. Gravity obviously wants to push the fluid down the reservoir, and as soon as I took the cap off there was a vacuum sort of suction noise, and now it's basically started to run out of here. So we're ready to get the one-man bleeder kit in here, so we'll get that set up somewhere in this wheel arch. Usually I do this with two people, so this is going to be a first for me using the one-man bleeder kit, so you're going to come along for the ride, I think. But yeah, at least something's getting through to it now. So just clean the worst of that off. Obviously we don't want to contaminate our new brake pads with brake fluid, so we'll get the bleeder kit. So that's the setup. Got it hooked up here with obviously the rubber hose onto the nipple with this special plate that stops it popping off. And then I like to have the pipe coming up. It says it doesn't matter with this one because it's got a valve in the end, so it can't draw fluid back. So it says you can put the bottle on the floor or wherever you want, but I like to do it with the tube going up. So when this is full of fluid, the bubbles always want to rise up and float to the top here, rather than if you have the pipe pointing down, then you can have the bubbles try and float back up towards the caliper, which you don't want. So this is cracked open by a quarter turn. So we're going to go give the pedal a press. Make sure that the reservoir's topped up before we start. We'll see what happens. So we just give this 2 or 3 pumps and see how we go. Something's going on. Check the reservoir. Water doing stuff. I'll just lock that off quickly. So I'll pump the pedal now to push the pads back out, so we know that they're sort of off of the outside wall, so hopefully allow it to come out a bit better, and whatever air can hopefully settle to the top. Then I'll top up the reservoir and we'll go again. So I think we're there now, so we just cracked it off a quarter of a turn. Give it some more pumps. You let me know if you see any bubbles. Well, I didn't see anything, so we just locked that off. 11 newtons apparently for that, and I don't see anything bubble wise in that tube, so I think we're good. Happy with that. I mean, didn't take a huge amount of brake fluid all the time, and it was very easy to do. I'm quite lucky it was this corner to start with. Usually if you're bleeding them you do the far corner, but this is the only one that's been disturbed, so did this one. And the good thing is I can lean out the door and press it and see if there's anything whistling up the tube. But yeah, we're all good, so that's all sorted. Put this all back together. You don't need to see me do the wheel and the other side, so there we go, boys and girls. Brake job is complete. Now feel a bit safer driving it, so take care of yourselves and I'll see you on the next one.